Welcome. I'm Viola Gonzalez, President of the League of Women Voters here in Oakland. Thank you for joining us to meet the candidates running for school board for District 4. This meeting is being made available with Spanish and Cantonese interpreters. Welcome to Andrea Rocha Puentes and Hernan Lafitte, Wei Kunin Tong, and Harvey Tai, who are helping us interpret today. We'll take a minute for the Spanish and then the Cantonese interpreter to give participants instructions in language so they can access the correct Zoom channel.
Para accesar el servicio de español, por favor, háganle clic al globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y ahí estará el cuarto de español. Gracias.
你好啊，歡迎你參加我哋今次嗰個網聚。咁麻煩你咧，你喺你個手機或者個手提電腦下低咧，你見到一個地球儀嘅，咁個地球儀咧，你就可以揀你呢個中文翻譯。你揀咗之後咧，就可以聽到我為你翻譯㗎啦。Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. School board directors are elected to work as a team. I'm sorry. Can you mute?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Excuse me. I will start again. School board directors are elected to work as a team with the superintendent to ensure students have access to a quality education. They set direction, adopt and monitor a budget, oversee the superintendent, and advocate for children in the school district and public schools. The league uses a few simple rules to be sure you get balanced information and all the candidates are heard equally. Finally, the league wants to always give the community a voice, so the audience was invited to send questions in advance, and those questions have been sorted by a team of league leaders. And of course, the candidates do not get the questions in advance. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for today, for this evening, who is going to run the program, Monique Berlanga, who by day is also Executive Director of Centro Legal de la Raza. She'll take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. So just quickly, I'm going to remind the candidates of the key ground rules. So first off, each candidate is invited to make a 1.5-minute opening statement. For each question, the candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer. We will switch up the order, so you'll take turns answering the question first. The order has been chosen randomly. To keep the discussion flowing, candidates will be expected to keep answers to 1.5 minutes. You will be timed and the timer clock will be seen by all in this box that says timer. As moderator, I might have to cut you off so we can stick to a schedule. It's not personal. And I want to then extend a warm welcome to our 3 candidates for School Board District 4. They are Pecolia Manigo, I will get that right, Mike Hutchinson and Nick Resnick. So I'll now invite each candidate to make a 1.5-minute opening statement, starting with Ms. Manigo. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone watching and participating. My name is Pecolia Manigo. I'm running for School Board Director of District 4. I'm a mother of 3, an OUSD graduate and 2 OUSD students. I'm the Executive Director of Bay Area Parent Leadership Action Network, and I'm also the current Commissioner for District 4 on the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth. I have supported parents to learn their rights and navigate our system for many years. For 24 years, I have been an advocate that's been pushing and fighting and advancing the idea of positive transformation in our public education system. So I'm running because I represent a voice that has rarely had an opportunity to be on our school board, a voice of parents, someone with the experience of how to engage community, how to engage different stakeholders across our city, and someone who is currently a parent in our system. I'm also a parent who has had the privilege of working herself off of CalWorks of really understanding what it takes to get out of poverty. And that is the experience of the majority of our families in Oakland. I really see the needs in our system because I interact with families on a daily basis. But more importantly, I understand that we have a really rare opportunity today in this year to really unify Oakland around creating a positive transformation for our school district, and look forward to talking to you all more.
Thank you, Ms. Manigo. Next, we have Nick Resnick.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Resnick, and I'm running because Oakland deserves a better school board, one that's really focused on kids and learning. With students falling further behind, our board continues to be in disarray, talking about everything other than student success. As a parent and as a previous OUSD teacher, I'm really sick of the politics of division, of wedge issues and false choices for our families, of a climate where people are intimidated from even speaking their truth in our city. I'll bring the focus back where it belongs, while modeling collaborative leadership, respect, and a solutions orientation. I'm a prior OUSD teacher, as I mentioned, an OUSD parent, and a 15-year resident of our district. I have the commitment to stay with this, as I have a 4 and a 7-year-old in our system. Most recently, I'm the CEO of a successful education company focused on student success. I'm a proven leader and have the skills to support OUSD's troubled finances for the long term and get us on a path towards sustainability. I have seen this as a teacher in our schools. I have seen this as a coach for Title I school districts. And I know deeply through my experiences that we can do better on behalf of all children. And I am here to work with you in partnership on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick, and I will pass it to you, Mike Hutchinson.
Great, thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters here in Oakland for hosting this event. Hopefully we eventually will get back to doing these in person. I miss the days of doing these at City Hall. So my name is Mike Hutchinson. I am currently the school board director for District 5 in Oakland. And the family house that I've lived in for over 40 years was redistricted through this last round of redistricting. So now as a new resident of the new District 4, I'm running to represent my new district, District 4, and also to ensure that District 5 will continue in the future to have a representative that lives in the new District 5. I am a proud graduate of Oakland Public Schools and spent over 20 years working with youth in Oakland and the East Bay until my 2 schools, Santa Fe Elementary and Maxwell Park Elementary, were closed in the mass school closures of 2012. At that point, I decided that I needed to have a different focus for my work, and I moved away from working directly with youth into advocacy and organizing, which I've been doing now since 2012. We had a huge breakthrough in 2020 when I finally won the school board election, running on a platform to end school closures and the financial mismanagement within OUSD. We've had a lot of successes in my first almost 2 years on the board, and hopefully we can build off of those successes going forward. We ended the blueprint plan in the citywide plan. We have balanced the budget for the first time in 20 years and are projecting surpluses in our next 2 years. And we are poised to finally leave state receivership in 2023. So hopefully with everyone's continued support, we can really turn this into the kind of district we all want to see it as. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. And now I will jump into the questions and right back to you, Mr. Hutchinson. First question. What are your top 3 priorities and what challenges will you need to address to implement them?
Well, my top 3 priorities continue to be ending school closures, and at this point, especially rescinding the planned school closures of 6 schools at the end of this year, to continue the work that we've done in stabilizing OUSD's finances, which sees us poised to finally leave state receivership and pay off the state loan that has existed since 2003. And lastly, to ensure that we have a new kind of community engagement where the community is included as partners and decision makers. And again, we've had a lot of success around these areas, but my whole time on the board has basically been during a pandemic. So the first thing that I had to really address coming into the board was how to move OUSD to be more responsive during the pandemic. I authored the first resolution to bring testing to every school site. I convened community partners to fill in the gaps, and we actively made sure we had safe and equitable schools and reopened at the soonest time possible. You know, one of the highlights that we don't get to talk about is OUSD did more testing for COVID than any other school district in California except for Los Angeles. So as we are moving out of the pandemic, hopefully another goal is we can finally address the restructuring of OUSD, which is something we haven't been able to do because we've been in a pandemic. This, together with a new school redesign model, we can finally fund the transformational change that we want to see going forward, because we have done so much of the hard work already in balancing the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Next, Ms. Manigo, I'll ask you the same question. What are your top 3 priorities and what challenges will you need to address to implement them?
Yeah, so my top 3 priorities is number 1, to stabilize our every school, including rescinding the school closures that have been put on the docket for the end of this year. My second priority is to really see a whole evaluation of the district's budget, including our bonds, including our supplemental and concentration grants, which are supposed to be principally directed to our low-income foster youth and English language learners. And my third priority is to really ensure that we have a teacher in every classroom. This one particularly is important to me as I've gone out and talked to thousands of students and parents, and that is their number 1 demand, is stability in our schools and really ensuring that they have positive and stable experiences with 1 teacher a year. That is the big challenge right now for our school system, is that we have one of the lowest salary scales in the Bay Area. It creates a condition of not being able to recruit, as well as not being able to retain educators in our classrooms. Right now, we have vacancies that our central office staff are fulfilling on our behalf until we are able to really ensure that. So, I've said this many times before, but I think it's important to say, we can have all these really great ideas, but if the foundation of our system is not solid, then it becomes virtually impossible to ensure that people are getting racially just schools.
Thank you, Ms. Manigo. And now, Mr. Resnick, what are your top 3 priorities and what challenges will you need to address to implement them?
My number 1 priority is a crystal clear focus on student learning. Right now in Oakland, we have 11 of 75 of the lowest performing elementary schools in the state of California. My number 1 goal is to make sure we have 0 schools on that list. I want to establish, right now we have no academic committee that really supports the board being held accountable for student success outcomes. And so I want to make sure that we institute that, and that is a priority and a central focus of every single school board meeting. The second thing I want to do is continue to stabilize the OUSD budget for our future. So the budget does face a structural deficit when we think 3 to 5 years out. Years of mismanagement going back decades, inadequate funding and structural challenges threaten the stability of our district. And that really leads to an inconsistent delivery of a quality education for our kids. As a CEO and former nonprofit leader, I've worked with Title I school districts for 15 years, and I understand the complexities of financial management and have led efforts to reform budgets. And I want to do that with all of you. The third thing is a little bit different, and it's establish an inclusive and positive adult culture. Infighting as a form of leadership has been on display regularly across our district. In order for things to drastically improve for children, we all need to come together in a state of compromise and collaboration to make this happen for our families.
Thank you. And we'll stay with you, Mr. Resnick, for this next question. How do you envision your role on the school board? And the second part of that question is, what particular strengths and skills will you bring to the board?
Sure. So I definitely, I can continue talking about that focus on number 3. So an inclusive and positive adult culture that actually allows us to make really hard decisions on behalf of our children. So I have spent the last 10 years as a facilitator and a coach working with cabinet level teams in Title I school districts to really align their investments with programmatic and policy decisions. So I worked with districts like Long Beach and Garden Grove to think about how they were going to institute a shift to Common Core mathematics and not only adopt the right curriculum, which we have done with our EL education curriculum in the early literacy space, but we haven't thought critically about what teachers need in order to successfully and equitably implement that curriculum. So if a curriculum is going to take 2 hours of planning per day, then we need to make sure we are providing that in our contract for our teachers, and that they have the time and the ability, not only those who want to work late at night, which should never have to happen for a profession, but that all of our teachers and that our policy decisions and our investments are coherently aligned across things so students receive that equitable implementation. So what I want to really bring is an intense focus on making sure that every investment we make is connected to a professional learning connection, is connected to a programmatic connection, and that we are thinking critically about how that's delivered in every classroom across our schools. And I have experience doing that.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson, you're next, same question. How do you envision your role on the school board, and what particular strengths and skills will you bring to the board?
Thank you. And I think this is one of the areas where there is a big difference between the three of us as candidates. I have a very deep and long-standing connection with the Oakland School Board, and I've been on the school board now for the past 2 years. In my time on the school board, I've authored and passed more resolutions than any other board director. I've co-authored resolutions with Director Davis, Director Yee, Director Gonzalez, and Director Williams. And I've done all of this in an effort to move the issues that my community has said they care about forward. I've worked with anyone who is like-minded and willing to put in the work with me. My relationship with the superintendent led to me being appointed as the school board liaison to the strategic plan that we passed that covers the next 3 years. And from that role, I made sure in the strategic plan that we scrubbed all language of charter schools and school closures from that plan, and that we explicitly centered Black and Brown students. It's because of the relationships that I've had and that I've been able to form that we've been so effective. And we are really poised to do more going forward. One of the things that I worked really hard to do, we are seeing the fruits of the labor now, where all 7 school board directors that sat on the board 4 years ago have now leaving the board, all 7 incumbents in one election cycle, largely because they were so unpopular for their policy decisions. So going forward, we need a board that has the experience and the track record to help guide this new board forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Manigo, I will ask you the same question. How do you envision your role on the school board, and what particular strengths and skills will you bring to the board?
Thank you. So I envision my role on the school board is really to ground the board and close the gap between communities and our school sites. Right now, there's a high level of mistrust across Oakland of the board. And I think there is a clear demand for new leadership. And I think it comes from folks weathering through this pandemic. Our sites and communities work together to ensure that learning and safety were prioritized and that our students were protected to the highest degree that we could possibly do during this pandemic. And they have needs. We have needs as parents, as students. We talk about being a student-centered district, but we don't see our board being responsible and responsive to the needs of students and communities. And that is evident in the actions that they continuously take. So I see my role as really being an organizer, being an education budget expert, being a coalition builder, as a nonprofit leader who has a track record of not only helping to write policy, but also to make bridges happen between city and county, state departments that our students really need services from to be more on the ground and based in our schools, which is why we promote ourselves as a district of community schools. This is work that I live and breathe. And so I'm bringing that work to the board to really be able to push forward a very clear direction of being a responsible district.
Thank you. And Ms. Manigo, will stay with you for the next question. The superintendent has argued that given the sharp decline in students over the last several decades and aging facilities with poorly paid staff, that the solution is to reduce the number of schools that must be managed and maintained to increase salaries to teaching staff. How do you propose to work with all stakeholders to resolve the school closures issue?
So I think that it's really important for the community to understand that our enrollment is unstable because of the fact that we have not prioritized as a city that it's our highest priority. We know what families want. We know what students want in the idea of a quality school, but we are not putting our investments there. We roll over investments in our central office without them being directed by our community, and that has to stop. We have to be willing to evaluate our whole district's budget, and as of today, that has not happened. What has happened is that we've seen our board make the decision to close schools in the course of 4 weeks. We've seen our board make the argument that to close schools would save somewhere between $4 million to $15 million. But what we've experienced on the ground is that we're losing revenue because when you close a school and you shut down a community's ability to have access to a quality neighborhood school, you lose those students coming to any other school in our district. So school closures do not save us money. There is no evidence of that in any closure the district has done in the last 10 to 20 years. But what it does do is accelerate the leaving and the push out of Black and Brown students. So I think we have to go to a zero-based budgeting model. We have to evaluate everything and ensure that we build a foundation in our district that looks at making sure we have investments in every school as we're supposed to.
Thank you. Mr. Resnick, I will ask you the same question. The superintendent has argued that given the sharp decline in students over the last several decades and aging facilities with poorly paid staff, that the solution is to reduce the number of schools that must be managed and maintained to increase salaries to teaching staff. How do you propose to work with all stakeholders to resolve the school closures issue?
So I really disagree with the way in which it was done last year, and the timeline and the list was not properly communicated to families. And I think that's what really caused the gigantic conflict that we all saw in the national media across our city. And no family should learn 4 months before their school is going to close that that's going to happen and have to figure out our enrollment system and all of these things that we know are so hard and have built around systems that make them inequitable for families of color. So I absolutely disagree with what happened last year. But what I do know is that we have a number of teacher vacancies in a number of our elementary schools. And those are generally populated in certain neighborhoods across our cities, across our city, where we have been historically failing families. And as a teacher at Community Day School back in 2008, I saw what happens when we don't teach our students how to read by 3rd grade. And then we try to change the narrative that they're the problem. So what I want to do is make sure to come in and prioritize teachers and prioritize students. And right now, we are spreading our resources really thin. And while it may not save money tomorrow or next year, we are not educating our children in the way they deserve to be educated because under-enrolled schools can't comprehensively have electives and community partners and a principal that's been there for 3 to 5 years. So I want to step back and work with our community on what actually is happening in reality and move towards a solution together.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson, and I will repeat the lengthy question. The superintendent has argued that given the sharp decline in students over the last several decades and aging facilities with poorly paid staff, that the solution is to reduce the number of schools that must be managed and maintained to increase salaries to teaching staff. How do you propose to work with all stakeholders to resolve the school closures issue?
Thank you for the question. With all due respect to the question, the superintendent has not argued that. And our current school closures plan didn't come from the superintendent at all. She was directed to come up with a list of schools to close by a vote of 4-2 with 1 abstention by the school board. We ended the blueprint plan, our yearly process of closing schools, last year on October 27th. So this is a standalone plan of school closures that, again, the superintendent, I'll let her speak for herself, but she was not pushing this plan and she has not publicly advocated that this is something that we need to do. When it comes to enrollment, there's a lot of just narratives out there. From 2012-13 to 18-19, enrollment went up in OUSD by a couple of hundred students. So yes, we took a hit from charter schools taking 15,000 students 10 years ago. And then we've seen an enrollment dip over the last 2.5 years during the pandemic, like every other district across the state of California. But the real question is, what do we do going forward? And so now we have this standalone school closures plan. We know that we are projecting budget surpluses for the next 2 years, and that's before we budget the $100 million in state surplus. This is not something that we need to do. There is no imperative. And we have to remember, of the 4 board directors who voted for this current school closure plan, 3 of them are going to be off the board in January. Hopefully, November's election is a referendum on this plan. And if we vote the right people in, we will immediately rescind this school closures plan.
Thank you. And Mr. Hutchinson, we'll stick with you for the next question. Switching gears a bit, COVID has heightened our awareness of students who have stopped attending school. Are you aware of any current efforts to track students who have stopped attending during COVID? How would you track this and get those students back in school? And lastly, what actions or strategies would you advocate or support that OUSD takes to address chronic truancy, which is defined as students missing 10% or more school days per school year?
Thank you. Now, there's no way I can cover all of those parts in 90 seconds, but I'm going to try to cover a couple of things. You know, we as a school district, and I would say we as a society and as a country, have not yet begun the work of figuring out what are the lasting impacts that COVID has caused. And I am very disappointed of OUSD's efforts around this front. I had fellow school board directors tout restorative reopening last year, and we saw nothing happen. We saw $10 million budgeted for mental health services, and most of those positions and programs were never filled and implemented. We don't know where a lot of students have disappeared to. And we're not the only ones in that situation. And it is a huge problem. Hopefully, there will be a systematic approach to this, and we really need state help and maybe even federal help. As a community, as a society, we need to have an all-out effort to address the needs of our students, the students who we have, quote unquote, lost over the last 2 years. As a community, if we decide that that's where we want to prioritize OUSD's resources, then we need to immediately come up with a plan and fund that. But it's going to have to be something new to address that issue. Now, the other issue of chronic absenteeism has been a longstanding issue here in OUSD. The best way I think we can address it is through school redesign, and we finally start building the community schools we want with arts, music, and sports, and especially with culturally relevant curriculum that will fully engage our students.
Thank you. Ms. Manigo, I'll ask you the same question. COVID has heightened our awareness of students who have stopped attending school. Are you aware of any current efforts to track students who have stopped attending during COVID? Secondly, how would you track this and get those students back in school? And lastly, what actions or strategies would you advocate or support that OUSD take to address chronic truancy, which is defined as students missing 10% or more school days per school year?
Thank you for the question. So I'm not aware of any efforts at this moment to track students who have stopped attending school. I am highly aware of it as a parent organizer, as a parent, as a community member. I have worked with many families recently who are struggling with housing, struggling with economic recovery after shelter in place. And meeting many barriers in our systems, whether it's in OUSD, whether it's in our city, whether it's in our county. The resources that people proclaim are budgeted are not easy to access. And that becomes a really important piece to lift up, that when you are not stable, you don't know where you're sleeping, where you don't know where you're going to get your next meal from, it is virtually impossible to say that you will commit to come to school. And we have to be able to have a conversation as Oakland about the gaps in our systems and the quality of our systems when you are poor and you are the most vulnerable in our system. Many of our students are unhoused that are not showing up at school. I know this from firsthand experience. And I want to make sure that as we kind of move forward, what I would like to do is to really have cross, school district, city, county conversations about how we're going to begin to track families, but more importantly, house families, and how are we going to provide the resources for our families who are working hours that are before school start and after school.
Thank you.
I have more that I could say, but. Big question.
Thank you. I will pass this to Mr. Resnick. COVID has heightened our awareness of students who have stopped attending school. Are you aware of any current efforts to track students who have stopped attending during COVID? Secondly, how would you track this and get these students back in school? And lastly, what actions or strategies would you advocate or support that OUSD takes to address chronic truancy, which is defined as students missing 10% or more school days per school year?
So thinking back about my time as a teacher, I know that what engages kids in school is not just reading and math and science and history, but actually the arts and music and teachers in front of them that actually share identities and experiences that they hold. And as we all know, we have a really hard time holding educators within our system that are experienced, that are, teachers that have proven to have results, both in the socio-emotional level and the academic level. And what we need to do is focus in on our raises in teacher compensation and how we are supporting the conditions that teachers work in so students want to come to school. Additionally, when we have under-enrolled schools, forget about the savings and money for a minute. When we have under-enrolled schools, those schools have a number of teacher vacancies because teachers don't want to work in a school where they don't have music, art, PE, gardening to give them release time to work together. It's a really hard place for principals to work because teachers don't have the time they need to be professionalized and to actually have space to reflect on and improve on their craft. So when I think about what we need to bring children into schools every day is a program that meets their needs. And across about 30 of our schools, we are not providing children and those families those opportunities, and that is unjust and not fair. So those are the conversations I really want to have. And that is what I believe will bring children to school every single day and what I've seen as a teacher.
Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to invite each candidate to make a 1-minute closing statement, and we will start with you, Mr. Resnick.
Sweet. Well, as a parent of 2 young kids that are 4 and 7 right now, and a previous Oakland teacher, I can promise you that I am here for creating goals together connected to our strategic plan that will last the test of time. In Oakland, we have been known from jumping from superintendent to superintendent, from board member to board member, and really shifting our priorities and shifting our focus. And when we do that, we hurt our kids. And so there's been a number of policies that have been passed over the past few years. But when we think about student learning and student health, we haven't seen tremendous growth. And so what I want to do is bring that drumbeat back to our student success metric. And that's not just about academics. That's about what type of programs do they have in K through 8. It's about what type of pathways are we supporting them with in our high schools. And it's about making sure that we retain our teachers and our principals, because that's the #1 thing we know can impact children on an everyday basis. I look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson, you're up next. I invite you to make a 1-minute closing statement.
Great, thank you. And again, I wish we had longer to answer each of these questions. I think it really does the issues a disservice when we have to shorten our answers in this sort of way. But I'm very happy to be here and for the brief amount of time that we do have. I think this is a historic election coming up. Like I said, we have pushed out 7 incumbent school board directors in 1 election cycle. So when we hear some of the problems of the past boards, I wholeheartedly agree. That's why we worked so hard to replace those people on the board. We have a historic opportunity right now. We have stabilized OUSD. We have decided to pay off the rest of the state loan early. We are poised to leave state receivership in 2023. And we've gotten rid of the blueprint plan. All we need now is to rescind these school closures, and we turn our school closure list into our school redesign list using sustainable community schools. And with these new resources coming in and with our stability to our finances, we can finally fund the transformational change that we all want to see happen.
Thank you. Ms. Manigo, I invite you to make a 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity and just, speaking for my heart, I'm a I'm a parent organizer. I'm a community leader. I live and breathe this work every day. I'm on the ground right now working to solve these challenges with other parents, with students, because our schools cannot just wait. I'm running because I have the skills, the experience, and the vision to be on the school board and lead this district to address these challenges in a way that they have never done before to bring about the racially just schools that Oakland really wants. I am endorsed by the Oakland Education Association, the state superintendent, Assemblymember Mia Bonta, Councilmember Nikki Bass, the Wellstone Democratic Club, Building and Trades, and many, many other folks, because I am challenging Oakland to stand united in creating racially just schools. I am not talking about this. I am asking folks to join an effort to really create leadership that can stand on solid ground. Thank you.
Okay, to close, I want to thank our three candidates. We know that being in the public eye and being part of this kind of work is demanding. So the rest of us appreciate your willingness to serve. And thank you to our participants and your interest in making educated choices. But before we break, we want to ask everybody to please respond to this very quick 2-question poll, because we do want your feedback. Great. And I want to also remind folks to please visit our website, lwvoakland.org, for information about our regular and expanded services. Tonight's recorded program will be on our website in all languages and available on many platforms, including KTOP and YouTube. A ballot is being mailed to every voter starting October 10th. Registration and voting links are also on our website. And when you get ready to complete your ballot, you might want to check Voter's Edge, which gives all the background information, candidates and ballot measures, just for your individualized ballot. This is a great project of the League of Women Voters in collaboration with Tech Volunteers of MapLight. And a final reminder, the League of Women Voters does the hands-on work of defending democracy year-round. We hope you'll join us. This ends our program. Thank you and good evening.